Hello there, a very warm welcome to episode 2 of the Tartan Daily, where we're going to talk about one thing only. Because nowadays, England fans want to talk like they get something to say, but nothing comes out when they move their lips. It's just a bunch of gibberish. And England fans, well, they forgot about Shay. Yes, we are going to talk about Shay Adams. And I have 3 people flanking me today. Now, the golden rule for podcasts is you should always do it with a number of 3, a total of that 3 people. I'm now hearing an echo because I accidentally had my own YouTube page open. This is going well. So yes, I have 3 people flanking me, and 2 of them are English. One of them is Scottish, because there was no way I was going to be outnumbered. And I thought, given the way that Lee Griffiths embarrassed Joe Hart in the last good match that we played against England, I thought, yeah, let's go 2-2. So first of all, we have Mark Duffy with us. He's down there in the bottom right. So... And Mark is a Derbyshire-based journalist who's known Shay Adams since he was a teenager and playing non-league football, because that's why I think Shay Adams' story is so interesting. He's gone from non-league to burying England at the Euros, hopefully. Maybe Mark and Will don't want to see it that way, but Mark, thank you very much for joining us, mate. I'm really looking forward to your insights. How are you doing today?
Good, thank you. Yeah, really well.
Aye, excellent. Above Mark, sitting upstairs from him, we have Will Turner, who is one of my best mates, who I've known for many, many years, now works on content for the England cricket team and the ECB. But first and foremost, Will, you are a fan of all things Southampton FC. And obviously that's where Shay Adams plays now. So how are you doing, mate? You looking forward to the Euros?
Very much. Showing there's not a few more Saints players at the tournament, Mr. Prowse in particular, but yeah, very excited.
Yes, well, obviously not the only Saints player in the squad either. And then just below me, I have Neil Doherty, who's a fellow Ayrshire boy and a Scottish fitba author, the author of World Cup 1998 Scotland's Story, the France 98 Journey. Neil, how are you doing, mate? Are you looking forward to us in a major tournament? Did you think it was going to be 23 years when you wrote the book?
Well, I was just chatting to Mark beforehand. Thanks for inviting me on, Stuart. No, I absolutely didn't, and I don't think anybody else would have either. And that was part of as I was chatting to Mark about before we went live, it's part of the motivation for writing the book was that I just couldn't really remember. It was so long ago, the last time we actually did it. So I think football memories are quite selective. So that was part of my motivations for actually writing the book in the first place, was trying to remember so long ago now. So thanks for inviting me on.
No, good man. Johnny G says, all right, Hodgey, moan the Scotland, it's boogie time, and we are going to boogie-woogie our way through this podcast. That's what I'm hoping anyway. For anyone that is watching us across the various social media that I've got this streaming down on, you can watch it on YouTube and just keep it running in the background. For anyone that's listening subsequently on the podcast, please remember to subscribe afterwards. And anyone that is watching on YouTube now, get involved in the chat, let us know you're there, or on other social media as well. I can see all the comments. Feel free to get your questions in for everyone and myself, and we'll try and tackle those over the course of the podcast. But, gentlemen, this is about Shay Adams, but before we get to that, it's about the Euros, and the Euros kicks off tonight. How excited are we? Who wants to go first? I'll go with you, Will, since you're just sitting to my left there.
Yeah, it's kind of crept up on me. I think, given the way Saints' season finished, kind of fell out of love with the game a little bit, but something about international football, it just gets you going. And when you see in sticker books, the wall charts, all that sort of stuff, it just gets you going again. There's plenty of good preview content out there as well, and just Turkey, Italy tonight as well. Just suddenly it's all kind of hit me in one big go, and there's nothing better than international football. And obviously you guys being at a major tournament this time around, I can't even begin to imagine how your excitement is compared to ours.
Oh, mate, it's unbelievable. Like, there's a video that I did on social media of, I was explaining it in episode 1 of the podcast, which if anybody hasn't checked it out, it was me, Rory Hamilton and Andy Barge. So 2 commentators actually working in the tournament, and then one who's completely out of work and doing a podcast for no reason other than we're at our first tournament for 23 years. But mate, like, my buzz has been extreme, and I've been listening to that Boogie Woogie Baccarat song like various times a day all week. And I've diversified today. I've gone for the Fratelli's cover instead. Because, I don't know, like too much a good thing. You know what I mean?
So it's not your alarm then? You haven't changed it to your alarm?
No. My alarm's still that beepy thing you get in an iPhone. So it's not going any further than that. What about yourself, Neil? You buzzing for this? It's all right. I've unmuted you, mate.
Okay, absolutely. I mean, I've been quite fortunate. I've been very fortunate. I managed to get tickets through the UEFA ballot, so I'll be at Hampden for all 3 group matches. And that I bought those tickets almost 2 years ago now.
Jammy, man.
Yeah. There was so many times I could have lost the tickets, and I don't know. I was at Euro 16 as a football tourist because of my dad. And
good on you.
I went to 7 matches, including England, Wales, and Longs across 12 days. And I don't know if that maybe went for my favour with UEFA. You never know with UEFA, but I got through the first ballot, so I won the ticket, and then we hit COVID, and obviously thought, well, there's no chance. But every obstacle I seem to have overcome, and now I do have my ticket for all 3 group matches. So I'm feeling fortunate. I won't probably believe it, Stuart, until I'm walking through the turnstiles at Hampden. But
I can imagine that, mate.
On the perimeter and the very strict security, it looks. I think it will look very different than anything we've seen before.
I don't know what they can, because you normally go to these major events and there's people touting tickets and stuff like that. There's so few of them that, and the security factors you mentioned, it just makes me think that it's going to be pretty much an impossibility to get tickets outside the games, and unless you're carrying about a couple of grand handy, just in the pocket. So, I think it'll be quite hard. And yourself, Mark, are you looking forward to the tournament?
Yeah, I don't know if it's excitement. It's often more apprehension as to how horrifically it might end for England every time I go into a tournament. There's been penalties this
probably.
time. Could be penalties, could be a dodgy goal, it could be anything. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think we've had to wait a bit longer, haven't we, for a big tournament. As Will said, it's crept up a bit. It's going to be a bit strange as well without the full stadiums and without the full effect of all the fans travelling around to various games. But obviously, England benefit a bit from having so many games here. So purely from that point of view, it's going to be good. But yeah, just the summer always comes around a bit too soon when the football stops, so we have to go without any for a while. But thankfully, this time there's no break, so off we go.
No, there we go. But this is one of the reasons we've got you on today is to talk about that journey, because football's all about a bit of investment in the sort of Roy the Rovers stuff, isn't it? So people are obviously down south. A lot has been made of kind of Jamie Vardy, obviously winning the title with Leicester after starting off his career playing in the non-league and things like that. It's obviously a fantastic story. We're hoping that Shea Adams can do similar, lift an important trophy after going from the non-league, but on the international stage instead. Now, obviously that's a wee bit pie in the sky probably, but I think it's a lot of people won't actually know about Shea Adams' sort of progression. So what I would like you to describe to me, you covered him when he was at Ilkeston Town, which was, and just I'd literally looking in his Wikipedia, I saw that Oadby Town was his first club, and it's got him scoring 5 goals in 33 games at Oadby Town, and then only 9 in 40 for Ilkeston. Now, granted, he was quite a young lad, but that's not the kind of goal return that suggests that you've got an international forward fledgling sort of at that stage. So what was he like when he was a young player, mate?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, he was less about goals because he was trying to sort of find his best role and position. I mean, just to give you a bit of context with Ilkeston, because it was actually Ilkeston FC he was with then. The previous Ilkeston Town had gone bust in 2010, and the new club Ilkeston FC formed and had quite a big ethos, a focus on academy football, and they had a really good setup where they were bringing a lot of kids in who'd been released by Football League clubs. And Shea had previous going to Oadby, he was at Coventry, I believe, until he was about 14. Was released by them, went to Oadby, who were quite a bit lower level than Ilkeston are, and then at 16, I think it was, he came to Ilkeston because they had a full-time academy. It was a good place for him to come and develop under Kevin Wilson, former Chelsea and Northern Ireland striker. He was manager at Ilkeston at the time. Darren Caskey was there, and lots of other good youth coaches who really helped him come on. Ilkeston FC have since gone. That club actually only lasted about 5-6 years. They went bust as well. I could write a book myself about Ilkeston football history, to be honest. But the new club, again, Ilkeston Town, has now reformed and there's a much brighter future for them. But he was there when it was Ilkeston FC. To answer the question, he was 16, 17, but he had the physical attributes.
Well, I was going to say, did he have a man's body even at that age?
Yeah,
he's got a powerful set of shoulders on him.
Yeah, often at that age, they're still quite wiry and physically they struggle, particularly in non-league football where you've got these brutes of centre halves and centre forwards. But I think he made his debut. I think it was a cup tie, and he came on as sub. And immediately he looked. We thought, hang on a minute, he doesn't. He's just his strength on the ball. We thought, he can't be 16. He then sort of broke into the first team during that season, and I think the sort of stats there, 9 in 40 games, a few of those were a sub at the start. But if you go onto YouTube and search Shay Adams and Ilkeston, you'll find some of the goals that he scored, which were 3 or 4 were sort of solo efforts from his own half. He'd run, beat players, score. I remember one of his first games was away at Stamford, who were top of the league at the time. They'd won all their games up to that point. Ilkeston went there, and I to this day, I've not seen such a dominant performance by one player at that level of football as I did that night. They won 4-0. He set up 2 goals, scored 1, and we thought then, hello, and then he just carried on during that season developing.
See, before that debut you spoke of, was there a bit of anticipation around the club? Like, was there? I thought, like, we've got a special kid that we're going to blood this season. Was there any of that, or did it just kind of come out of nowhere?
Well, I think the fact he was put into the first team suggested they had a lot of faith in him. They obviously realised they had something a bit special there internally, and then obviously once the fans started to see him play again, they're thinking this kid's got something that even players 10 years older than him didn't have. And then it was a question of how long he might stay, because obviously a lot of league clubs around the area who started sniffing around him quite quickly. But I think there was one defining moment. He scored, again, this is on YouTube if you have a look, he scored a goal at Ashton United up in Manchester one day. Brilliant solo goal. Went down the right, cut inside, beat a player, 2 players, scored. And I was at the game, and I turned to the person next to me and I said, if this kid's not in the Premier League within 5 years, I said, I don't know why I said, eat my hat or whatever. Now, no word of a lie. I think it was about 4 years and 10 months, something like that, after I'd said that. He signed for Southampton. And I'm not proclaiming to be mystic, Mark, or anything, but you just, and he obviously had a couple of goals before that, but they're just, that kind of goal was enough to, it's one of those get you off your seat type goals, make you think this kid's going to be a star, nobody else can do that at this level. And he's gone on. I mean, Sheffield United picked him up, which is a really good move for him. His first move with Nigel Duffy bringing him in. That was a great start for him. And everyone was just chuffed for him. And you never know with players who do that in non-league, whether they go up into league clubs, how it's going to go. Sometimes they just don't fit. Sometimes they drop back down again. But I think one of his first games was against Tottenham, who I'm a supporter of, incidentally. And it was in the League Cup semi-final.
Nobody's perfect, pal.
No, I know, tell me about it. And I tweeted it. I sent him a direct message on Twitter saying, hey, if you get a chance in front of goal, stick it in the stand, don't you, Shay? And he's like, oh, yeah, we'll see what happens. Of course, he then came on, and within a couple of minutes, he had a chance in front of the copper, and he put it in the net, didn't he? And then he scored another one straight after that. And I think I tweeted at the time, look, we told you he was good. And it kind of, that was his launch pad, really. And the rest, they're saying, is history. But yeah, he just had something about him that I've not seen really in anyone that age at that level of football that's left me. Perhaps didn't expect him to be playing in the Euros for Scotland at this stage, but you couldn't really predict it quite how far he'd go. But he was going to be a star without wanting to cliche it too much.
No. I think you can notice that star potential, and particularly when you see it at that sort of raw level of football, it can really stick out. And one of the things that you sort of said there, now I obviously referenced the goal return with my extraneous research stretching as far as looking at his Wikipedia page. But, well, you've obviously watched quite a lot of him for Southampton. Do you see that same kind of unselfishness that Mark was talking about there in terms of the way that he sort of plays the game on a week-to-week basis? I mean, do you think he's a real sort of team player in terms of his ethos and the way he approaches it?
100%. It's really interesting hearing what you say there, Mark, because obviously not following him early in his career, but seeing him at Saints, there's so many comparisons and things that you're mentioning that he did then that he's absolutely doing now. The strength is one thing. That's still a big part of his game. And in terms of being like a selfless player, like there's no getting away. It was a tough start for him at Saints. But the fan base,
why was it tough?
It wasn't scoring goals. I think when you come to Premier League, fee, you want to get off the ground quickly. And also the other thing that went against him was very early on. He was denied by some unbelievable saves. Dean Henderson at Sheffield United. He just missed out on a goal on his debut, actually, and you just think that might have changed things. But yeah, that tough start. But the fans, didn't depart him because he does work very hard. You can see there's enough there. And I think the journey as well, you want someone like that to do well. So that certainly works in his favour. And the other thing you said about those special goals, I think you just have to look at the goals he scored for Saints, even the first league goal against City. It had been a long time coming, but lobbing Ederson as he did, there was an absolutely brilliant goal he scored against Sheffield United. He's not a player that taps in from 2 yards and he's in the right place at the right time. He's someone that scores big goals. And hearing you guys talk yesterday about moments following Scotland, I feel like if he's going to score for you guys in this tournament, it's going to be a goal that really stands out. He doesn't seem to score simple goals. They're always good-looking goals. I know it sounds weird, but he does. He's always doesn't take he's just puts everything into every shot. He's not necessarily placing them when he's played for Saints. I just feel like there could be quite a big goal for Che at the Euros. And I know I've got to say these things about Scotland and Adams for this podcast, but it's genuine. I can see it happening.
No, it's all right, mate. I got you on because I knew you would be balanced, and thankfully Mark is as well. But I just had to keep the seesaw level at 2-2. And on that note, Neil, in terms of what you've seen so far from Shea in a Scotland shirt, have you been impressed? Because obviously there's been the appearances he's had so far. I think he's really impressed. He's obviously got an assist and a goal. So I think the one thing that stood out for me just before I throw it to you is the intelligence of the movement. And the fact that we now look like we have a player who, regardless of the shape we play, will give us two forwards on the pitch, two natural forwards, not attacking midfielders, but forwards, because he occupies that space in between the middle third and the final third so well. And then he can also peel off into the channel and do his work there. But it's, as we say, powerful running and intelligent running, not real sort of raw pace, which was a sort of misapprehension I had about him, because when I saw him sort of playing wide, you just think young player playing wide for a championship team, as it was at the time with Birmingham. I just thought, right, this is this guy's going to be fast, but he's not like that. But what stood out for you so far when he's been playing in dark blue?
Well, when you asked me to do that, I was like people have said, there's so much content out there at the moment with Scotland in their first major tournament for 23 years. It's like, what do I read next? I've got all the guys, official programme, World Soccer Guide 442, all the rest of it. When Saturday comes, and it's so much to read, the Athletic app, and I'm.
I appreciate you cramming to come on, mate. Legend.
It was one of those ones that actually, the point I'm making is, it was actually quite nice to just look at one player, and amongst all this information, just have a look at Shea Adams and a wee bit more depth. I mean, obviously Scotland debut was against Austria on as a sub, and that game Dykes started up front with Christie in support. I think Ryan Christie's maybe one of the main losers with regard to Shea Adams' introduction to I suppose unexpected introduction to the Scotland fold, because, and I think we got a wee reminder against the Netherlands in the warm-up game how good Ryan Christie can be at supporting Dykes. I think Dykes for me is that focal point that you need in international football. He's a hold-up man, and that's just my view. He's that focal point.
That's what it's about.
Yeah, and I think for me personally, Dykes should start against the Czech Republic. I think Adams should start with him, would be my view, and that's off the back of what I've seen through those 4 games that he's played, and thinking about it in a wee bit more depth. That debut when he came on, Dykes, as I said, had played up front with Christie in support, and then he started the match against Israel, 1 each draw, and he played alongside Fraser, and Dykes was dropped. And I think it wasn't so long ago that we were saying Ryan Fraser was next to Dykes was this certain before Adams was introduced, they were the second starters, you know. And you could see why, because Ryan Fraser, obviously another terrific player, but I don't, against Israel, that was, when you look at that starting 11 against Israel, it's frighteningly close. I thought if we got it kind of wrong that night, I think you'd maybe agree, Stuart, that it was just something off about that performance. Israel, we stood off them. I think although Steve Clarke has defended those performances against in the World Cup qualifier,
I think that was probably the poorest we've been under the boss.
Yeah, we weren't good against Israel, and Adams started up front with Fraser, and they linked up quite well because they're both good players. But and if you remember, Adams drew in the 3 men for the assist. They laid on the goal for Fraser, didn't he? Drew in 3 men cleverly, and he rolled the ball to Fraser, who looked as if he was going to he'd missed his chance, didn't he? And then scored. But I think ultimately, when you look at the next 2 games, and it's Dykes alongside his next 2 caps 3 and 4. I had a look at it against the Faroes and against Luxembourg. It was Dykes alongside Adams, and I think that's probably in a game that we need to win against the Czechs, or we hope to win.
That's the way that I would go. Yeah, no, I'd be the same, mate. I would go with that, and I think it was the combination play. I tweeted a few times about it during the Luxembourg game. They seem to have a good understanding, and they seem to dovetail really well, because Dykes is obviously more of a target man, and she likes to drop into pockets and peel out wide. So that combination is really good, but the intelligence in terms of spatial awareness that Shea Adams has got seems to be something that is benefiting the team as a whole, because what he's doing is he's standing off and not running into the box and then running late and creating the wee half angles and stuff that basically gives us a few more combinations that we can do in our attacking play. So it's a bit more Pythagorean in terms of the kind of angles and stuff that we're making passing wise. And I think that's obviously a real bonus for Scotland to have that. I ran a poll on my Twitter just coming into this game, because Andy Barge in episode 1 alongside Rory Hamilton was he was saying that he reckons Shea Adams is now probably your number 1 selection, like as ahead of Dykes in the pecking order. Now we've suggested that we probably want them both to play against the Czechs, but I ran a poll to see who would be your sort of number 1 choice up front for Scotland. And 62.9% of respondents in that wee 4-hour poll this morning said that they would go for Dykes first. Now that's quite telling for me, that he's already come in and had enough of an impact that people are already looking at him as the sort of main man up front. Just quickly, Neil, would you concur with that? You know what I mean, would you say that you would go with Adams ahead of Dykes at this point, like if it was one or the other?
No, I would go with Dykes as the focal point. Dykes is the main striker, and Adams and Christie contesting that number 10 role. I suppose Christie. That I think that will be a big one against England, when obviously we're expected to probably more likely be. Well, we'll be going out to win against England, probably not, and I think maybe Christie might be favoured in that match. I've been thinking about this one a lot. Mm-hmm. I'm not too sure, but I would say that Dykes is our main striker, and Adams is, that's just my opinion, is maybe contesting for that second supporting striker role. And Christie, I think, supports the midfield a wee bit more than maybe Adams. There's a lot to Adams' game, though, as maybe Will could speak about the assists as well. Like there's a lot to his game. He's a very interesting player.
Absolutely.
Granted.
Yeah. So I think they had quite a few assists last season as well. And I think one thing that really stood out to me, and this is definitely in the second season when he just looked far more at home in the Premier League and at Southampton. You'll probably remember early last year when Harry Kane was making assists, dropping deep, and everyone was saying Mourinho was a new tactical master. Adams actually was doing a lot of that as well, but clearly he plays for Southampton. He's not getting those headlines, but dropping deep and finding runners beyond him. He's very intelligent and a very creative player that people don't necessarily give him the credit for. He's also a lot better when he's playing up front with somebody else, which goes along with what you guys seem to be suggesting. And that's not just in terms of link-up play, but midfielders as well coming behind him. He's just a very, very good link player. So everything you're saying about how he might be used and with who, I think you're going to get the most out of him in that way. But yeah, he's certainly as creative as he is lethal when he's in on goal.
Yeah, just in terms of that sort of non-league grounding he had, though, Mark. I mean, Will's already said that a lot of the stylistic hallmarks that you saw when he was a young kid still sort of prevail now. But is there anything about that particular grounding that he had that you think will give him something a wee bit different in terms of approaching this tournament, whether that be from a psychological perspective, whether it be in terms of hunger? I don't know, whether it be in terms of the way his game sort of is. Like, is there anything you think he's got that's a bit different that could potentially hurt some of the teams in the group?
Well, I can only really talk about, obviously, in terms of having seen him play in the flesh, what he had then. But I think in terms of that grounding he had, obviously, you know, when you've got that sort of, if you to coin this cliche, if you can do it on a wet Tuesday night in Ilkeston, then you can do it against anyone. I mean, he's got, and again, just to draw comparisons to Jamie Vardy, different kinds of player, but you know, they've come from a level of football that is really biting scratch, and you know, and to have come through it like he did, and then go on more. He's now developed much more physically. Obviously, he's been coached a lot more differently since he left. So he's then brought on all the other parts of his game that have, you know, improved dramatically at Sheffield United and Birmingham and obviously Saints. So I think, yeah, I think it's just a different. I mean, we talk about a lot of he's made in England at the moment about the fact so many of the squad have had their groundings in the lower leagues. Even Harry Kane spent quite a while on loan, and I think there must be something about it because there's a few of them in there with that, and maybe having that upbringing. Experience in the sort of lower levels and differences that it can bring does give you something when you finally get into the top levels. Maybe it's always been like that, but I think with Shea certainly he's just a very different. I don't know how many of the Scotland squad may have come from the lower levels, but he's come from and not. I mean, it's still semi-pro level, still a good standard of football that he came from initially, but
yeah, of course.
So you know, it's not sort of in any way because it's quite a few players have gone on and done very well, but it must count for something. I think the fact that he's quite quickly, he did quite quickly develop.
So something that strikes me is I think a lot is made of these kind of professional academies and stuff now, but it's a totally different type of upbringing, as you say, playing against big burly defenders, taking no prisoners at that level of football when you're a kid. Like, I mean, we're talking 16, 17. Not even a fully fledged adult yet, regardless of how his personal physical development was at that point. And for me, that must surely put something in there psychologically that's different for coming through sort of one of these super academies, you know?
I think you probably develop a fearlessness that you might not get from playing academy football. I think we notice it a lot with some of the lads that came from academies who used to just passing the ball around and tippy-tapping and all that stuff. Who just couldn't, you know, some very good players. Some of whom did go on to play professionally, but who couldn't cope down at semi-pro level because they just get kicked in the air and didn't like that and didn't have any time on the ball. Whereas Shea he just sort of burrowed through everybody and had no fear whatsoever about him. And I think again that was a big factor. He was determined to get the move he finally got, but even from that point on, he still had to work very, very hard. And I mean, I couldn't believe I covered a game I covered a Derby County game at Birmingham 2 or 3 years ago when he was there, and it was the first time I actually seen him play in the flesh since he left Ilkeston. And you know, whilst his game was more or less the same, physically he just, as you'd expect from somebody who's growing into being a man, obviously he was just mounted. And I just think he started so young doing that, and the fearlessness he'd have had to have would have made him stronger physically. Because if you know you're going to be kicked up in the air by a burly centre half that weekend, you've got to be mentally and physically prepared for that. And he had that every week. And I just think, and he'd have had it coached into him as well. Because as I said before, so many kids at that age are just not physically you can't expect them to be physically able. Obviously, we get a few that come through, don't we? Who play at the top level straight away. But yeah, he was one of them. And so yeah, I think he wasn't scared of anybody then, and I don't imagine he is now, to be honest.
That's going to appeal to the Scottish fan base, the more of that they see, because we like players.
Well, I hesitate to use the words Braveheart, But
yeah, but you think he's got
he
one?
might end up being one. Well,
I'll tell you what.
Time will tell.
Is there a cynicism though, like among? I don't know. I mean, maybe you can sort of answer this, Neil. Within the Scottish fan base, it didn't seem to me that there was a lot of, well, he's just jumping on the bandwagon to get to a major tournament kind of thing. I mean, there might have been the odd sort of throwaway comment, but I think his performances very quickly won over the hearts and minds. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think we just welcomed in somebody who had something a bit different. You know, the way I think we've spoken about his finishing, like the way he shifts the ball on his right, he doesn't really tend to score average goals. I mean, prepping for this, I watched all his goals in the Championship for Birmingham. I mean, superb, and so many of them involve that moment where he shifts it onto his right, and we've seen that already for Scotland. And a lot of reading about him, a lot of the talk was about whether him and Ings could play together and whether they were maybe like both occupying the same spaces, which led to maybe Adams' goal return not being. But then I think statistically, when they looked at it, his link-up play with Ings made it so that the chances created and the goals put away for Adams didn't really change much because obviously Ings had an injury season for Southampton. But I thought what was quite interesting was at Birmingham, and I don't know, I'm not going to search for the guy's name, but was there a big centre forward? I read an interview, it was with Gary Monk, and Birmingham put a big centre forward up next to him, begins with a J.
Lucas Jukovic.
Yeah.
And the quote was, when he had that physical presence, which maybe could become, not seen the guy play, but could be comparable to Dykes, then that was his best, when he found his best form, playing off him, and maybe him and Ings were slightly too occupying the same spaces. So I think that's maybe an encouraging thing for Scotland.
No, definitely. I think so. Well, interesting your view on that. Well, what kind of partner do you think's best for Shea Adams?
I think it depends, not to certain offence, depends on the system, but he's shown he definitely needs someone with him. I think with Danny Ings, they dovetail really well in terms of like it's those one touches, and that's had to be progressed. So it might be that actually on an international stage where he hasn't played with someone as much, to have that develop that partnership, maybe the big guy would be better and more of that instant connection will be there a lot quicker. But I don't think he's the type of player who would only be compatible with one type of striker, given the way, he's a good all-round striker actually. So I don't think that, I think he'll find a way to work with anybody. But I think if you're looking for kind of some quick success, it might have to be a bigger man rather than two more similar players like with Adams and Ings, who have had to work to create their partnership over a decent period of time, actually, to be as good as they have been. It took time. So I think that's probably the way that you might have to go.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Just in terms of, I've got a few comments coming in about various kind of ways they would construct the team. Joe Finlay says for the England game, he'd have John McGinn, who's obviously been full of goals for Scotland in recent times, as well as Aston Villa. He'd have him off Dykes with a midfield three of McGregor, Armstrong and McTominay. Then versus the Czechs, very much the two sort of forwards in Adams and Dykes. That seems to be the general consensus among much of the Scotland fans. Just looking for a kind of neutral view from yourself, Will and Mark. Do you guys? What do you think? Because you've kind of you can look at it a wee bit impartially, because obviously we're in England's group, right? But taking off the tinted spectacles for a wee while. What do you guys think from the outside looking in, as it were? I mean, are you impressed with Scotland's squad at the moment? Do you think this? I mean, I know we're at a major tournament, but if we're honest about it, we got through to the major tournament through the playoff that we earned through the Nations League, which we've got Alex McLeish to thank for, as well as a 3-0 defeat in Kazakhstan. Borat jokes in the post, please. But yeah, like generally, if you look at the Scotland squad at the moment, I mean, do you think this is a strong pool that we're operating with? And what's the kind of attitude down south sort of going into the tournament with regards to us? Either of you can go on that. Sorry,
I was jumping. I'm not going to proclaim to know a great deal of in-depth about some of Scotland's players, but I think clearly Steve Clarke seems to have found a bit more of a sort of rhythm, if you want to call it that, there, and they've qualified for the tournament, and that's a start in itself. So they're there. The tournament itself will be a complete unknown, really, because I don't think you can really predict truthfully how it will go. I think the first game, obviously, against the Czechs will be huge. So if they can win that, then who knows? But yeah, the pool of talent does seem to be not too bad. They've obviously been quite shrewd in getting people like Shea Adams involved. You've got obviously McTominay, who's doing well at Man United and has come on a long way. I'm glad you put that up because it reminds me who's there. Obviously you've got Andy Robertson who's been flying at Liverpool, and it's just whether these really strong players who've been playing a lot in the Champions League and playing in the Premier League, winning the Premier League or whatever, making that fit perfectly well with the lads who perhaps aren't playing at such a high level. And it's always been the case, I guess, with Scotland in many ways. But yeah, looking at that, I mean, they're not the strongest team in the group, of course, but there's nothing to say they couldn't qualify from it, and then who knows after that.
Who's stronger, just now, what, England or Croatia? First 11.
I think, obviously I know Croatia beat England in the semis 3 years ago. I think England will be stronger, but they're on their own patch. I haven't admittedly studied too much of Croatia recently. I don't know what sort of state their squad's in, but I'd say England are stronger at the moment, and I think you have to look at England as being favourites to win the group. And I don't say that with any bias. I just think that's probably how it is.
No. But, I get that.
They've been in that situation before and completely flunked it. So I have to say I think England are stronger than Croatia, but it's anyone's group. Certainly the two qualify, so it could be anyone's.
Fair enough. Well, what's your thoughts on both the quality of Scotland's pool, which is still on the screen there for you, and just generally the way you see the pecking order in the group, mate?
Yeah, I mean, as an Englishman looking at that squad, I think there's plenty of players there who have performed at the top level for a decent amount of time, but equally you've got these young guys who are coming through, are there for a reason. I think that as a combination is really exciting. And just in general, it feels to me like you guys up there are obviously hugely excited to be there, but actually there's part of you that's thinking this is a decent group of players that, in the format of the Euros, the group, the pool, I don't know, you just dare to dream a bit. That's the impression I get from you guys up there, and with every right looking at that group of players. And specifically for me, Stuart Armstrong's in there, who has been, you could probably say, Ings aside, Southampton's best player for the last 2 seasons. So
really, whoa, yeah. We need to go down that rabbit hole then, mate. What? That's really strong words. Yep. You would say that, and that's, by the way, just for any Scotland fans listening, Will is my oracle in all things Saints. Like, whenever I've done a couple of Southampton games, whenever I've been commentating on them or anything like that, I always give Will a wee text, a wee phone, like, what's the temperature at the club right now, mate? That kind of thing. Why'd you say that, mate? Like, has he really been that good? I thought he was kind of in and out at one point.
When he doesn't play, we are far worse for it. He's really important in the way the system is because of his work rate. His work rate is through the roof. He's creative. Mm-hmm. He gets people like Adams into the game as well. Yeah, and just simply statistically, and just, you get a feel when you watch your team, there's something missing when he's not there. We don't have a particularly strong depth of squad, as you guys probably, well, you wouldn't be saying, but the squad is pretty weak. And he, again, slowish start to get into things, but actually he's become one of our most important players. And
wow, that's good to hear, mate. Like, I've got to admit, I'm like sitting here with a big smile.
Good goals too. Again, he scores good goals.
Yeah. He's another one that scores good goals. I can actually attest to that for his time in Scotland. One thing that disappoints me is that the Southampton fans haven't reappropriated the Stuart Armstrong song that referenced his hair that Celtic fans used to sing. I thought that was one of the better football chants in the Scottish terraces at that point.
We stole the Wanyama song, which I know irked you at the time.
Not giving away my allegiances there, are you? Excellent. Neil, we've got a question that's come in that, I couldn't have a better guest to ask this question, I don't think. Johnny G, who's been very active in the chat, says, do you think this team could perform better than the team from France 98? So it's a tournament which I spoke a lot in the opening episode about how that's the one that I remember, greeting after the game against Brazil, all of that kind of stuff. Disbelief watching us against Morocco. I must admit, at that age, boredom. in the middle game against Norway because I was like, this isn't a good game. Frode Grode, I think it was in goal from Norway in that game. But it tells you everything that I remember the goalkeeper's name, because that's what that game was for me as a wee boy, memory wise. I think you've got, without being cheeky, mate, a couple of years on me. So on that basis, like if you do a kind of comparative between the squads from then and from now, and obviously the tournament format's a lot different. It's a Euros, it's not a World Cup. Obviously, the majority of third-placed teams are going to get through to the knockout stages in this tournament, which we had our own views on the kind of format in the opening episode. Don't want to go over that. But how do you think comparatively, do you think we could perform better? Now, by that, I don't necessarily mean going through the group. So perform better would be going through the group as one of the top two and just generally getting better results and playing better. What do you think?
Craig Brown only had 22. So straight away, he had the goalkeeping dilemma. That was, I think, the press tried to make more of the Marshall Gordon. It's incomparable to the drama of Gorham and Leighton at the time. That was front page, and it rumbled for years. And
which he got wrong, by the way, in my opinion.
Well, I obviously, I really enjoyed Mr. Brown's Boys the other night, which if Will or Mark didn't see, that was a documentary on France '98, and but I suppose they didn't really go into the drama of Gorham versus Leighton. My book, I suppose, is a kind of what's and all, where there was a huge competition between Leighton, who was the second highest appearance maker. He's to date is Scotland's record appearance maker at the World Cup with 9 appearances. He was in 4 consecutive squads, so he was the man with all the experience, and he played fantastic in qualification. Gorham, I think, was the better keeper.
Maverick goalkeeper, mate, like one of the best in the world at the time, in my opinion.
At that moment, I think the general consensus in Scotland was, and I was 18 France '98, so I watched it in the pub drinking Tennant on brand.
Rubbish beer, by the way, in my humble opinion, but there you are.
So I do remember, but so that was one aspect. The goalkeeping was a lot. We tried to. I think the tabloids tried to make more of that than there actually really was. I think Marshall will play defensively. I think we were better in France '98. We had a more. I mean, by the time we got to France, Henry was a colossus. Colin Henry at the back, obviously.
Mate, what a player! Like he was you're talking about Bravehearts earlier, Mark, right? He was the guy who had the nickname. What an absolute, just like the embodiment of a captain in a team. That's what he was.
Absolutely. And the parallel with the 3-5-2 I found interesting, Stuart, because we played a 3-5-2. That was Craig Brown's go-to formation when Clark introduced it. I found that quite an interesting parallel when I was writing the book. I started the book in September weekend 2020. So Scotland hadn't qualified, but so then when Scotland qualified in the November, it took on a whole different meaning and drove me forward to try and get out there. But
good man.
Yeah, I mean the 3-5-2 Brown had adopted. Did he play it in every match at Euro '96? I don't think he definitely played it against England, and it was
He switched in one of the games. I can't remember what game it was, but he changed it. Mm-hmm.
First game, I think it was 4 at the back. But Colin Henry in the middle, Colin Calderwood at right centre back, and left centre back Tom Boyd. They were really a settled three. And do we have that same strength?
Oh no, we don't have that calibre of centre half right now. We definitely don't. I mean, one of them's we've got a left back playing as one of our centre halves, but funnily enough, with the way, I mean, obviously the game, the actual way that football has changed, it's a totally different sport now. You couldn't have a Kieran Tierney left centre back in 1998. You know, you would probably want someone bigger and stronger, but not just that. It would be a total waste of a player like that's talent. Whereas we've got our really, really interesting tactical wrinkle now that we've got the basically 2 left backs and creating a complete an underlap, an overlap. We've got all sorts of problems that we're going to cause for teams with that because it's an idiosyncratic element of our tactical approach, which I'm hoping yields a couple of goals. But I don't think the quality is good. But I'll let you get through the other areas of the team as well, mate, 'cause it's quite interesting.
No, I think your point there. Like, I mean, it's very unorthodox. The left centre back bombing on in Tierney, and it's a great asset. There's no doubt about it. Whether was rock solid defensively. I think we were 6 games into France '98 qualification before we let in a goal. Incredible stat.
Wow.
Yeah. Apologies if it's one game out either way, but we got.
No, you're all right, mate. Your memory's better than mine anyway. I was just a wee boy at that point.
Kenneth Anderson, who had scored 5 goals at USA '94 to be second top scorer, the Swede scored against us. He was kind of the nemesis, but we qualified ahead of Sweden. He was Colin Henry's nemesis in that qualification campaign. He was superb, big physical forward.
I can remember him playing in Football Italia. I think he was a Bologna player in the late 90s. Aye. Aye. That's how I remember Kenneth Anderson, mate.
Midfield, right and left, but Craig Brown didn't call them his wing backs. He called them his wide midfielders. The 3-5-2 had, where did it emerge? It was credited to Bilardo in the '86 World Cup, coping with how to fit Maradona into a team. So that's where it's credited to, the first time it was ever seen, and then it was.
One thing I would say though is, like, Brown, you would definitely say, like John Collins, for example, was a wide midfielder or a winger, right? Andy Robertson's a left back or a left wing back. So the argument, I would say 3-5-2. I would probably argue we're more 5-3-2 now, just because of the nature of the players that we've got out wide. Don't get me wrong, because of the athleticism of Andy Robertson in particular, it's just a description, and it's just obviously the way the game's kind of changed, and the fact that fullbacks and the overlap is such a staple of the modern game now, and arguably some of the most important players in your team. But Stephen O'Donnell on the right side, again, like, I would say very much a defender. You know, Nathan Patterson probably a bit more attacking in terms of the outlet that he offers. But yeah, and what about the centre of midfield? How do you think that is comparatively strength-wise?
I mean, we had Paul Lambert, who had 96, 97, 97, 98. It was just a boys' own story, wasn't it? He won the Champions League with Dortmund. He backed himself, was one of the pioneers of the Bosman ruling. And what a story that was. He became the first non-UK player, or first UK player to win the Champions League with a non-UK club. So that I mean, incredible. And from a kind of forgotten attacking midfielder with Motherwell, and he'd been captain of Scotland's under-21s, but had become forgotten. By the time France '98 came around, what a player Lambert was. He was at the very top of his game, and he was, for me, the kind of missing link between. He was very modern at the time, because he was converted, wasn't he, at Dortmund, into a central defensive midfield player, and he would pick the ball up from. And for me, he was the best player on the pitch against Brazil.
Yeah, he drive runs.
And it's the way he would pick it up from, and he would pick it up from Henry or Calderwood, and him and Collins very quickly gelled, because they were so good. The two of them were so clever and such good midfielders that within a few games, because Lambert didn't have that many caps by the time he came in for France '98, but looked as if he'd been there for 6 or 7 years. And that I mean, his link-up play with Collins, who would have been the third midfielder? McAllister got injured, he would have been playing. So the stars aligned for
just
Paul Lambert.
Generally though, what do you think the strength between the two midfields? Would you give the edge to the current generation, or like in terms of strength and depth as well?
Well, I think McTominay is fantastic, isn't he? I think that position's crucial, the one that I'm discussing there that Lambert took up. I think we're going to play McGregor in there. I think, as you discussed yesterday, Gilmour would improve the team in there, but it's maybe just too soon for him.
It's a bit early. Actually, just let me throw to the down south view for a wee minute. Billy Gilmour and Scott McTominay, what are the views of those respective players south of the border? Go to you first, Will.
I can only talk about what I've seen, but McTominay to me is someone that is a very, very good player as well. I think he's actually quite underrated. I think he's not that particularly glamorous, in a United squad, a Man United player. I feel like I don't feel like he gets the credit he deserves. I think he's a very, very good player, much better than people give him credit for. I think he's perfect for someone like Billy Gilmour as well in that midfield. I think Gilmour, from my point of view, it's disappointing. He's not had a few more chances with Chelsea. Obviously, when he has played, he's made an impression. There's a lot of hype around that. And then he's kind of, I wouldn't say fallen away, that suggests it's his fault, but the opportunities haven't quite been there with the change of management and stuff like that. But, you don't come into a team like Chelsea, play and make that impression if you haven't got something about you. So I think there's probably excitement that just needs to get games at this point in his career, doesn't it?
Yeah, fair play. And to add to that, Mark?
No, like Will, I've sort of seen limited action of Billy Gilmour, but I think Frank Lampard quite liked him at Chelsea, and such as he likes bringing the young players through, and obviously gave him a chance. And I think it was a cup tie against Liverpool. He shone in that one. That sort of showed what he was about. And I think he's probably one certainly for the future, whereas McTominay is very much in the present. He's come through very well at United. Again, sort of without a lot of sort of fanfare. He does his job in there, pops up with the goals as well. Yeah, too now. That's come more into his game than it used to. So a couple of good players to work with certainly. And it's the thought that Gilmour will play regularly in the tournament, do you think, or is
not in this tournament? I think it's too early for him. I think if we need to twist our hand going into the final game, I think there's a chance he maybe starts that, but I don't see him starting against the Czechs because it's a tried and tested system, and England it's too big a game to throw in a kid like that. I think he would probably throw in one of the other more experienced midfielders even into that McGregor role before he would do that. But come the next tournament, Qatar, if we get there, or whatever, the next qualification campaign, even or later in this one, I think Billy Gilmour will be a Scotland starter before long. And I'm just hoping that he gets the right. I mean, I don't think Thomas Tuchel sees him as a regular first teamer at Chelsea. So on that basis, I think a loan move to another Premier League club would probably be a really good thing for him at this point, because it would get him regular football. And I think he's reached that stage where, working in an academy like Chelsea's is all well and good up to a point. And then there comes, he's just turned 20 today. Happy birthday, by the way, Billy. The whole of Ayrshire is proud of you, mate. Tomorrow's episode is going to be all about you, if you happen to be watching. I'm sure you've got better things to be doing. But, the reason I'm focusing on an episode on him is because he's such a special talent. I watched him at the Toulon tournament quite a lot because I was covering it for a newspaper when the Nationals up here a couple of years ago, and he was outstanding. He's like Xavi. He just makes the half angle for the passes, and he's got that positional awareness. He's also got the touch. You know how there's players that they'll control the ball and then take the touch into space? He's one of those ones that the first touch is into the space. He's a really, really intelligent player. And it's very, very exciting. He had one really good run against Luxembourg. And if he was to add, I'll tell you what, if he was to be a bit more lethal in the opposition box, you'd have pretty much a fairly complete midfield player, So on that basis, he's a really exciting talent for us to be working with. I'm going to throw another question out that we've had come in, which is going off topic a wee bit, but it's going to be the last one, and then we're going to do some predictions and wrap up. Do you think, John Bleasdale's asking, do you think Kieran Tierney can attract a big money move away from Arsenal with his performances in the tournament? We'll come to you, Mark, on that first. What's been the general perception? You're sort of a full-time football journalist south of the border. What's been the general kind of consensus of Tierney at Arsenal? Because it seems like, judging by social media, which is never always a wise thing to do, but it seems like the general consensus is he's absolutely flying for Arsenal and was probably one of very few bright lights in an absolutely abysmal campaign for them last season.
Yeah, he struggled a bit, didn't he, when he first came down from Celtic. But I think, again, from what I've seen of him, and I'm saying this as a Spurs fan, I'm delighted that the question hints that there's bigger fish for Tierney to fry than Arsenal, because clearly now that they're just a mid-table outfit, he could earn a big move. Look, he's obviously the bombing up and down wing back, as you said earlier, is such an important part of the game now. And he'll be a real asset. But interesting to see how he does work with Robertson being in the squad as well. I know he's been playing him at centre half.
It's not like that though. If you watch, like, I don't know if you've seen it in the build up. No, it's basically like two left backs, mate. Like it's essentially so
Which
the way
how
that
it
you
needs to be used.
Yeah. But it's essentially, you know, the way you
sure.
would have a left back and a left winger if you had a really attacking full back and a player out wide playing maybe enough 2 flat 4s. It's kind of like that, and that's the way that the dovetailing works. It's really exciting, man, and it's where we would cause these problems.
When you've got 2 players like Robertson and Tierney, who are seasoned now playing in the Premier League for good sides, you've got to use them to their strengths as long as you can fit that in with the rest of the side. So, I do through gritted teeth. I like Tierney, and again, another player who could have a big say on what happens.
Granted. Just in your opinion, well, obviously you've got your finger on the pulse down there. What do you think in terms of potentially winning a move away from Arsenal if he can have another good season?
Yeah, well, I think the Arsenal dressing room is not one that gets a lot of praise for having a lot of bottle and leadership, but he's clearly gone in there and been that guy from Arsenal fans and people that I spoke to. I think he's shown that on the pitch as well, that he's got a bit about him. He's got that character and charisma and wants to bring people along with him. I think that'll be attractive to bigger clubs. And just simply as you say, it's becoming one of, if not one of the most important positions in modern teams in football. So from that point of view, the age he is, the international experience, going in and dominating at a club like Arsenal, I think there's every chance, isn't there, really? I think there's a little bit more work to do, a bit more consistency, do it for another season. But yeah, why not?
Fair play, right? We get to the bit of the podcast that's kind of become my favourite. Anyway, for anyone that's been watching and tuning in, thank you very much for getting your questions in. If you've got any others that you want to rush in before the end, then please do get them to us. But we're going to wrap up with some predictions. So we'll just go round in clockwise fashion? No, that's anti-clockwise. See, whenever you do these things, the camera works in reverse. So we'll go in clockwise fashion. We'll start off with you, Will. I'm getting people to predict various things in the tournament. So we've got 5 categories here, and we'll just go on each category round clockwise. So first thing is, how do you think the results will go for Scotland in the competition? I know you guys will probably be more invested in the England side of things, but I'm interested to know. So we're playing the Czech Republic first, then England, then Croatia. Tell me the results in each of those games, Will.
So you want an actual score?
Actual score.
Okay. Sorry, but I think so. Croatia first, did you say?
No, Czech Republic first. That's on Monday.
1-1 draw.
Okay. Yep.
2-1 against England.
What, defeat for us?
Well, unfortunately, yeah.
That's what I said. Okay.
And Croatia. Let's go for another draw.
All right, okay, so we're going to whimper with 2 points, right? You're never getting back on me. Mark.
I think the Czechs, they'll be up for that because I know that's a crucial starter for them. And let's say Scots will win that 2-1. Let's be positive. England, I mean England. I struggle to see that they'll be good enough to overcome England, he says with enormous optimism, knowing I could look pretty stupid this time next week.
I hope so.
England 3-1. Will you have a goal? 3-1 England, and then Croatia. Yeah, I don't know. 1-1. There you go.
Okay,
I'll sit on the fence because by then, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
You look like you're on an eye. Because the same results I said. So I said we will beat the Czechs, draw with England. Beat the Czechs, lose to England, draw with Croatia. So,
I think how the group maps out will play a part because obviously come the Croatia game, it could be a winner takes all. That could play a part. So yeah, it depends. But I would hope. Apologies for the dog. I would hope that they will. I knew that might happen. I would hope that they'll give a good account for themselves, Scotland, and will make a good group of it for all of our sakes.
The dog's just telling you in dog speak, like, stop talking rubbish. Scotland are going to win all 3 games. So that's that.
Exactly.
Just before we come to you, Neil, Ollie Middleton's got in touch and said we need some Alan Hutton love from a Spurs fan, the Scottish Cafu. Right, so I have a theory in this. He was the best right back in the world for 3 days. We played 2 games against Italy in the space of 3 days, and he was the best right back in the world for those 3 days. He was unbelievable, and it was just as he was beginning to hit his stride at Spurs. I think he was a brilliant player. And I know he had good periods and fallow periods at Spurs. But overall, how do you look back in his time with your teammate?
I don't have massively fond memories of Alan Hutton at Tottenham. I don't think he was... He didn't stand out in the same way that he has done at other clubs. I know he's a legend at Villa, and Scots love him. I don't know. He was... inconsistent and needed a move when it came, and he went to Villa, I think, with Genius at the same time, and it kind of took off there for him. But yeah, he's not remembered as fondly, but he did the job. But I'm glad that he's so highly revered elsewhere.
No,
because he's hard worker. He was a hard worker, and he knew what his game was. But Sicky, he just wasn't consistent enough when he was at Tottenham.
I suppose Spurs were beginning to sort of push on as a club at that point. So I suppose like consistency is a massive thing at the bigger clubs. Neil, going back to the predictions, mate. Just with that slight interjection for a minute there. How do you see the results going in each of the games, mate?
I'll have to go for I'll be positive. We'll go for a win against the Czechs. I think we need to win, and I'll be positive and go for there was goals in against the Netherlands, so 2-1 against the Czechs.
2-1.
Hopefully.
Yeah, that's what I said as well. Cool.
England. Oh, there's definitely goals in England, and I don't want to be too negative, but I think that's a defeat. I'll go same as Euro '96, 2-0 to England.
Oh, that's going to be sore, right? Then Croatia.
Well, nothing each draw against Croatia. 4 points through.
4 points through. Right, I'll take that, mate, if that's the case. So going to you again, Will. I've asked everyone so far to see what Scotland's starting 11 will be in the opening game. I'll bring up this to give you a wee bit of help, mate. If you think you can... I mean, to be honest, I'm quite happy to give a pass to the 2 English lads on this one.
I wouldn't want to... Yeah, I don't want to... I couldn't do this enough justice. I don't have the knowledge. Fair
enough, right? So we'll stick with you in this, Neil. So that's it, right? I'm only going to... So we're making the rules for this podcast as we go along. Only Scottish guests are going to be getting asked for the first 11 for whatever the next game is. Neil, what are we playing in the opening game, mate?
So it'll be Marshall in goals, Stephen O'Donnell at right wing back, Andy Robertson at left wing back, Jack Henry at right centre back, Grant Hanley as the centre back, Kieran Tierney as the left centre back. I'll go for Callum McGregor as central defensive midfield, John McGinn and Scott McTominay either side of him, Shea Adams and Lyndon Dykes up front.
That's spot on, bang on, team wise. Points tally that Scotland are going to get, we've already decided from the scores and the results that we've had. And then I want people to tell us their top scorers for Scotland. So who's going to get the goals? So if you think back to the results that you offered, do you think it's going to be different scorers? If so, who? And then is anybody going to be sort of get a couple of goals, maybe 3 even? Push if Steve Clarke's team suddenly develop a very cavalier approach. So, well, who do you fancy to be in amongst the goals for Scotland?
I mean, there's only one person I can say, surely.
Well, yeah. No, there's 2.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. I wouldn't be surprised if he got on the score sheet at all. But yeah, it's got to be Che. But definitely watch out for Stretch Armstrong.
Like that pattern, mate. Mark, who do you fancy being?
I think if Shea's used properly and effectively, and he's on his game, he will score and create. It's just a question of, against obviously the better sides, how much balls are you going to get? How many chances is he going to get? Will he take them when they come?
He actually, I mean, he scored against Luxembourg, but there was also a couple he was a wee bit profligate with. Well, I'm interested, Will, and I don't know if this is something he's developed in the kind of more modern years of his game, right? But there was a few crosses came in that he could have headed, and instead he tried to turn into Liu Kang out of Mortal Kombat and like do weird scissor kick volley stuff.
Yeah,
like, is that normal?
That is definitely a trait of his.
Why?
You'll have to ask him. No, I'm not sure, but it'll be those looping balls where you could just get up and nod, but he'll kind of wait and volley. And sometimes he scored, but sometimes you missed it altogether. But that is actually quite interesting that you picked up on that, because that is a trait of his to look to shoot rather than head the ball.
And was he doing that at Ilkeston Town, Mark? Like, or is this something he's just doing more modern sort of time in his game?
I don't recall him doing too much. I think the manager at the time, Kevin Wilson, probably would have
had a
ground if he tried to do too much of that at 16 or 17 years old. But he's obviously got that about him, and it's good that he's got the confidence now and the ability to do it. But no, I don't recall him being particularly flamboyant at Ilkeston. But I don't know. I could be wrong. There may be one or two signs, but no, he's
that's fair enough. I think hopefully what I'm hoping, Will, is one of those like scorer of good goals that you talk about. I'm hoping that it's going to lead to one of those in the major tournament. And I did say against Luxembourg, him and especially Dykes actually got all of their misses very helpfully out the way ahead of the Czech game. At least that's what I'm hoping anyway. Neil, who do you fancy being in amongst the goals for us?
I think the scene is set for John McGinn, Stuart. I think.
Yeah, I feel that, mate.
Yeah, to be the man, the first scorer at a major tournament since Craig Burley in 1998. I mean, against that Norway game that we discussed. So that's the last time that goal was scored. Yeah, so
that makes me feel that just brings home. Like that's a thing to say that just brings home how long it's been. Craig Burley, who's annoying you on American soccer coverage, you know. We point of view.
Over Grodas, the goalie that you mentioned, a lob over him.
Yes.
I think they played together at one point as well in England. I think Grodas was with.
They were at Chelsea.
And I think he was also at Tottenham. Was he, Mark Grodas?
Possibly. He was, but he didn't play a game. Grodas. He was.
No, he played for Chelsea when Ed De Hoy got injured, I think. See, I remember everything about 90s football. Ask me about last season, I'll struggle. Just more invested in it when I was a wee guy. But I think they were at Chelsea together, mate. But so you think John McGinn is the one who could get a couple of goals? I think there was a similar prediction in pod number 1. So that's good. Anybody else that you fancy to maybe bag one or a couple?
My prediction there was off the cuff, but I think I went for 2 goals, didn't I, against the Czechs? So I'm going to say Shea Adams. That shift onto the right, and I think he takes a half chance, Shea Adams, and Hanley's a danger from set pieces. So if we could take a bit more care, we need to take care over those set pieces. Steve Clark needs to roll out John Collins, Paul Arnott, how much care they took over those set pieces. Every one was like a treasured, and every one was off the training ground and different. And I see a lot of set pieces wasted. And at all levels of football that I watch, and I think we need to be using the set pieces. And Big Hanley is definitely a danger.
Turnbull could be if we need. So late on in a game, he could be an option, and with the expanded substitutes as well, I think we're going to see some interesting sort of variations and stuff in the squads. So I'm interested to see how that impacts things. And just on the taker of half chances comment, well, at this stage in his career, Shea Adams, better with a one-on-one where he's got time to think about it, or better instinctive finisher?
100% instinctive, and that's been through the past 2 years. Yeah, lots of time, that tends to be against him. But if there's something where there's such a clear option to take, whether it's a tighter angle, you've just got to shoot. When the options are simple, that's when he's at his best. I think when he's one-on-one with the keeper, you shoot, you take it round, and that tends to he's not at his best there. When he doesn't have to think about it, he can just react. That tends to be when he's been at his best.
Fair play. Got a prediction come in here. I can see it just now. McGinn screamer in the 94th minute at Wembley, another overhead kick. I hope to goodness that turns out to be true. But anyway,
it might do, but it'll just be a consolation goal, 3-1.
You're getting brave, Mark. You're getting brave, mate. No, excellent. So, gents, we'll go in clockwise order again just for this last bit. Obviously, you guys, thank you very much for sparing your time today to come on. It was really interesting to get a bit of a more holistic appreciation of Shea Adams and that kind of thing. Obviously, as usual, the topical kind of going in wee different directions, but really interesting to hear both the sort of the original, the genesis of them from you, Mark, and then the kind of revelations, biblical metaphor here, the revelations and what he's like now. Well, so I think it's good to hear that, but really grateful for your time, everyone. If people want to find out where you guys are, I'm going to put my scrolling ticker along the bottom so that people know where to find me. But, well, if people want to find your work and your thoughts and musings on social media, then where can they do that, mate?
At Will_Turner 71, I believe.
Why 71? Are you really the 71st Will_Turner on Twitter?
First number I had playing hockey back in the day, and I've just kept it ever since.
Oh, he was a good hockey player, by the way. Played up front. Tenacious, greedy, and a bit moody.
Wow, spot on. You do remember one.
Of course I do, mate. One of my best mates. Mark Duffy, what about yourself, mate? If people want to find you on social media and tell us a bit about the kind of general work that you do as well.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Duffers Sport. I write across several newspapers across Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire Times, Mansfield Chad, some of the more regional local papers as well, including Ilkeston, which are now part of the Derbyshire Times, but who I've covered Ilkeston Town for a long time. Just across the board there, really. Been involved around here for a while. So any particular sport, particularly football in this part of the world, and particularly non-league, I tend to be the go-to person sometimes. So that's generally where I'm.
My mate, who's a non-league expert, basically put me in your direction immediately. He's like, Shea Adams, talk about his time at Ilkeston. Duffers is the guy you want to speak to. So yeah, at Duffers Sport, is that right?
Yeah.
If people want to find you, excellent. And Neil, finally yourself, mate. Good Ayrshire boy like myself. Where can people find you on socials, mate? Let us know about the book as well.
Make the mess of that. My book's for sale on Amazon. It was released about 4 weeks ago, published about 4 weeks ago. So
congratulations, mate.
Thank you. And I came onto Twitter with no followers, so I'm Neil Doherty, 1873, trying to promote the book and a wee change of emphasis, doing things like this. So thanks for inviting me on, Stuart. I also have a website. I'm a Kilmarnock FC supporter. Kilmarnock
again, nobody's perfect.
Oh, we're relegated this year after 28 years in the top flight. So I created a website to promote my book, and a wee bit of Kilmarnock FC blogging has drawn me in because of the catastrophe of my home club. I'm a season ticket holder with Kilmarnock. We got relegated. So I'll be on my website, maybe analysing Kelly. East Stand.
All right, okay. The one silver lining, mate, is you're going to have league derbies next year.
Yeah.
That's going to be exciting. I'm going to go to one of them. In fact, would you want to go to an Ayrshire derby together? We'll make that promise now. Right, let's do that, mate. Cracking. Aye, but so people can find the book on Amazon, right?
Amazon. It's on sale on Amazon, paperback and ebook.
Excellent. And what should they put in the search bar?
Well, search France 98, Scotland. The actual book title was World Cup 1998 Scotland Story. I wanted the title to be clear and to explain exactly what the book is. The subtitle is the France 98 Journey, and just search that on Amazon. Paperbacks $10.99. Amazon have reduced it to $10.58 at the moment, and the ebook is $3.99.
Brilliant stuff. So you've got all your instructions there, troops and troopettes. Go and have a look at that. And that'd be quite nice, actually. Tinge the here and now with a bit of nostalgia. I think everybody's got room for a wee bit of that sort of thing going on in their lives. But that is all for today's Tartan Daily. You can subscribe to the podcast on all of your favourite podcast platforms, as well as to me on YouTube. And of course, you can find me, Hodgeythehack. That's Hodgey, the Hack, on all the social media channels. If you can give me or the podcast a wee follow or a wee like, whether you are listening subsequently or watching concurrently as we stream, that would be much appreciated. And if you're among the people watching on Facebook or YouTube, then remember you can hit the bell on YouTube for a wee reminder of whenever I'm going live with a new stream, which I'll be doing, by the way, throughout the tournament. I'm going to be doing one of these every single day till Scotland get knocked out, and probably the day after, because I'm going to need something in my life to comfort me at that point. I do have another good idea for tomorrow's episode. I've already given it away. We're going to be talking about Billy Gilmour tomorrow. And then on Sunday, we will be looking at the opposition. I've got a Czech journalist coming on who's going to give us the lowdown and everything about the Czech Republic. So that will be good. Make sure and share this episode if you did enjoy it. Please, I'm trying to build up a wee following for these. So if you could please get in touch with people you know that are buzzing for the tournament and might be into it, then please do share the episode. And likewise, get in touch with me. Send me a wee DM on Twitter. Let me know what you like, what you don't like. And then hopefully I can make this something that people enjoy moving forward. But yes, if you are sharing it, please use hashtag the Tartan Daily, all one word. And I capitalised the Tartan and Daily to do so. That will make sure people can find them easily. But that's everything. So thanks to everyone who's watched today. Thanks to anyone who listens subsequently. Stay safe. And until... Oh, well, actually, I say stay safe. Just enjoy the first game of the night. I'm buzzing to actually see some tournament football. Basically, the next month is going to be sorted, isn't it, Jets? Like, we now have our next month of entertainment sorted. Obviously, a bit of pain along the way, but that's fine. Severe pain if England get to the semi-finals or further. That's what we're hoping doesn't happen, at least me and Neil anyway. But yes, thank you very much for everyone that has taken. Thanks to you guys for taking part. Thanks to everyone who's watched. And remember, no Scotland, no party.